Welcome to Whitetail Wisdom, brought to you by Conquest Scents, with your host, the Deer Professor, Doug Roberts.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the first Whitetail Wisdom podcast. We're kind of excited about doing this podcast. It's been coming into the works for about a year now. People have always asked me, you got to write a book. And I'm like, I don't write. So the podcast is the next best thing. But I'm Doug Roberts, your host. Karen and I, my wife, we own Conquest Scents and Conquest Deer Farm. And what we like to do is we would like to start answering some of your questions, getting on different topics throughout this process. But I want to explain a little bit of who I am shortly. So we've been raising whitetail deer for 33 years. Through that process, you have no choice but to learn a little bit about whitetail deer. And so hopefully some of that knowledge I can pass off to you, and you can use that out into the field to improve your hunting or improve your habitat management, your herd management, whatever that is. We also 20 years ago created Conquest Scents, which is EverCalm VS1 rutting buck, and we came out in the wax stick formula, which really revolutionized the scent industry. So that is where we're at. We're currently sitting in my office here on the deer farm in the manufacturing facility of Conquest Scents. But I didn't want to do this podcast alone. I have a good friend of mine called Duran Martinez. He has been the host of Wild Michigan Radio for 17 years.
17 years now.
And I have been on his radio show numerous times, and we have such a good banter back and forth, and he has so much knowledge and good questions about whitetails that we want to do this podcast together. But I want Duran to introduce himself a little bit and kind of explain what he's done.
Yeah, like Doug says, I'm Duran Martinez. I'm in my 30th year of radio. I started back in 1994 when somebody says, hey, you ever done radio? And I said, no. Well, come fill out an app. Well, literally 2 days later, I'm on the air at America's first classic rock radio station, which was then 92.7 WMMQ. The format came to be in 1985. So a classic rock was a new, the phrase was coined by Fred Jacobs, and then that format was born. Well, about 9 years later, I came into work for that station. Later went on to a station in Lansing called Q106, which is a very popular rock station, and then back over to 94.9, which was, again, classic rock. The original classic rock station had switched signals. Okay. So they were a 50,000-watt stick. And I've been doing that, like I said, for about 27 years. But during that time, I was producing for another outdoor show and decided I wanted to do my own. Well, they said, sure, we'll give you a week, put it together. And that's.
And you're talking about a TV show here.
No, I was talking about radio.
Okay, just radio.
Just an outdoors radio show.
Okay.
Then I panicked and realized I know nothing. I mean, at this point in time, I'd never harvested a deer. I'd never bow hunted. Walleye fishing was, on a 2-man boat out in Houghton Lake. So everything, it turned into guests. Let's get the guests. Let's ask the questions that I and probably everybody else have. And learn. Well, since then, man, I have been able to position myself with the top names in the outdoor industry and learn, like learning from you, learning from Tom Nelson, learning from everybody. And it has changed everything for me. And that's why you and I have been so successful, because I have the questions that everybody else has. I'm not going into this knowing anything, and every answer you give me gives me another question.
It does. It works out very well. And the thing that's interesting is, we don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I've learned, the deer have taught me. When you live with them 24/7, literally, we're in the middle of the farm. And so wherever we look, there's whitetail deer of all ages. And what's nice on the farm here is they're categorized by sex and by age. And so I can watch the buck fawns and see how they're acting. I can watch the yearling bucks. I can watch the 2-year-old bucks, and I can start to learn some different things from them. But these are all the different things that we're going to get into on this podcast. But again, if you have questions or if you have a topic that you want us to get into on this podcast, simply go to media@conquestscents.com And we will literally try to put that into one of the podcasts and answer those questions. The other thing that's really neat about both of us, and Duran has probably more contacts than I do, is getting the other hosts on.
Sure.
You've had Ted Nugent, you've had Tom Nelson. We've got a lot of the TV hosts that have done a lot of hunting that we've sponsored over the years that we can get on. But again, it's wanting to answer your questions, your information. We have a whole list here. I mean, antler growth, antler shedding, feed supplements, minerals, patterning of deer and bucks especially. It goes on and on. So as we go into these podcasts, that's what we're going to start looking at and doing, and kind of excited about it. This is fun when I get to talk about white-tailed deers because it's what I do.
Right. And it's a learning, like you said, it's a learning experience for you every day you go out because weather temperature is never the same. Weather conditions for the year are never the same. Cycles we pretty much have cycles to a degree determined in the wild, but they're not always. I mean, the photosensitive process, the light that comes throughout the day, the type of weather, everything is, their life is based on that. Ours isn't. I mean, we live indoors. Everything's, controlled.
When we go out into their world, they know their world extremely well. And, you look at this past winter. It's been the craziest winter we've ever had. I mean, you go to northern Saskatchewan all winter, they had no snow. They couldn't even run snowmobiles up in northern Saskatchewan. I just talked to some friends up there. It's nuts. So we'll just get into those different types of topics. We hope you enjoy them. And again, if you have questions, media@conquestscents.com, and we will try to answer every one of them.
So the beginning. There's a genesis. Let's go to when we met, if you don't mind, because when we met, this was Border Crossing Scents. This was new. There was another scent and stick company that tried to come on my show and sponsor. I said, no, I'm working with Border Crossing at the time. And then that everything changes with one deer.
it was amazing because what happened was Border Crossing International, I had farms up in Saskatchewan and Alberta that I had animals on up there. And I got genetics, son of the gun genetics, up across the border. And we started that process. So I had farms in Canada and the U.S., so I named the farm Border Crossing International. Well, when the scent idea came out, we just simply said, Border Crossing Labs, short for laboratories. And I was stunned at how many phone calls I got to buy Labrador puppies. And I went, I'm not a dog raiser.
No.
I'm a deer farmer. And I instantly, we went, we got to change the name. So we went to Border Crossing Scents. And that was great. Mm-hmm. It was red, white, and blue. It worked. And then it was a buyer at Bass Pro Shop actually come and said, I can't carry your line of scent products because of the name. We're like, what are you talking about? He goes, man, down in the South, if we say Border Crossing, and it hit us, we went, oh my goodness. We're not trying to be offensive to anything. Mm-hmm. And so we sat down and we said, what name do we come up with that we can stick with? We can't keep changing. We're changing the packaging, the whole process.
Which is expensive.
Very expensive. So that year, we happened to have a yearling buck that we named Conquest. And at that point, he still to this day is the largest yearling we've ever grown on a farm. He netted 173 inches typical as a 1-year-old. And we were coming up with all these names, and every name was taken. And finally, one of the employees said, man, this is like a conquest that we're on. And Karen just kind of turned and looked and went, what'd you say? And he said, I just, it's getting really difficult. It's like a conquest. And she goes, well, what about Conquest Scents? So we literally immediately called the trademark attorney and said, check to see if this is available. And he got right back and he says, actually it is. And so hence Conquest Scents was born. And then Karen actually is the one that actually designed the logo, the head part, and then a friend of ours put the antlers on it. And that really cemented the scent company in the industry and allowed us then to start with the wax stick formula, which everyone thought it was a joke. When we first, you remember, it was the, hello.
Right.
Is this deodorant?
Strong enough for a buck, but made for a doe.
Right. Yeah. And, but it was a new way of applying scent. At that point, you only saw liquid urines. And so why would this work? It's so different. Well, it's easy to use. It doesn't leak. It doesn't spill. It's not messy. And it evaporates before it goes bad. And wax is a natural holder. So it keeps it fresh in that container. So, and then when everyone literally figured out that it really worked really well,
Right.
first thing they say is, we're not telling anybody. And that's a death sentence to us as a company. And we're like, no, you got to tell everybody. And you're like, oh, no, I'm shooting the big bucks in my area that we didn't even know were there. And I'm not telling any of my buddies what I'm doing. And we're just like, oh my gosh, we're so defeated. But
Well, think about the process. Think about, when you have that scent encapsulated in the wax. Now I'm going to go back to my childhood when my dad had the orange hunting suit that he would go out in. He would put it on at home, go out, come back, and he smelled like the full bottle of what he was wearing.
Yep.
And it stayed that way until Mom washed it in her scented whatever, in her Does or whatever we used back in the day.
Right.
And, we always knew when it was hunting season, aside from my dad going out in the orange suit, you could smell hunting season from the estrus in a bottle that he would use.
Yep.
And you really think about what that is doing. I mean, it not only is it familiarizing the deer with that same scent with you and your presence, as where, like you said, this evaporates after a while.
Right.
And it's like a whole new deer coming out. And the beautiful thing about EverCalm is because it's made with the bedding materials, what you guys are doing, the process that goes into that wax form, it's like a whole new experience. And the curiosity that it's meant to bring in will drive that curiosity, the natural curiosity of a foreign deer in their presence.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot to be said just with that alone.
Well, saying that, let's explain when we got into the industry, we were so frustrated because all the hunters have been trained to believe that ammonia-smelling urines were good. And we know that if it has an ammonia smell, it's going bad. But the larger companies don't own their own deer, and so they had to buy it from the deer farms. And so they have to fill 55-gallon drums, and then they ship it to the bottling plant. Well, that's sitting there going bad the entire time. We're literally sitting in my office in the manufacturing facility. So at Conquest here on this farm, the process of creating EverCalm in a stick goes like this. We got the barn right over here. Literally right now, there's deer in the barn. We put them on Monday morning. They'll come off Wednesday morning, which is tomorrow. We collect the urine each day. It's brought over. Literally yesterday, we mixed it up, and I just took you through the building, and we're pouring it into the wax formula today. It will be packaged tomorrow. You can't get anything any fresher than that.
Right.
So it's collected on one day. It's mixed the next day, it's poured the next day, and packaged the next. That's 4 days. That is why it works so well, because it is literally so fresh. And then you put it in the wax, and it's sealed.
Right.
Then we put it in the sealed bag, and it will sit for 3-4 years in a dormant state until you put it out in the open. And deer know what real deer smell like, and they want to know who everybody is in their area. So that's why EverCalm has become so effective. It's kind of to Karen and I, it's a pinch me thing, because nothing has come about off our own thought process. It's something has happened. We always say God has put something in place, and we realize it, and then how do we collect it and manufacture it? From VS1, the neighbor kid, coming and saying, I'm going hunting. I gave him some, and the bucks came right to him. To EverCalm, the worker, holding all those deer in the barn, mad at me because we're getting out late, and he goes out back, and all the wild deer just congregate right to him. He's like, it doesn't matter if I stand up, I sit down, I'm talking to you on the phone, they don't care. And I said, well, Curtis, you stink like a herd of deer.
Right.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the perfect scent. But how do you collect it? So we had to figure that process out. And then the wax formula. So again, it's been one of these processes that we've gone through to get to where we're at.
I think too, you made a really interesting point without knowing you made a really interesting point in regards to
I totally missed it.
that smell. That smell. What do they trust more than anything? Not here.
Other deer.
Not always here. Their nose.
Absolutely.
And that's where they don't care what he looks like. They'll see other deer and it's just another animal. But that smell is what piques their curiosity, and that's why they came in close.
Well, exactly. Every hunter has seen this process. Deer will go downwind because their nose has to be first. Then they'll stand totally still and they'll listen and they'll look to see if there's any movement or any sound. But you're right. It's the nose absolutely first. If that nose catches anything that is not natural in the environment, now they're going to lock in. They're going to start to listen and see if they can. And if they can't define that, if they can't define what it is with 2 out of the 3 senses, the mature bucks, bye-bye.
Yeah, right.
They just slide back in, and what do? They wait till dark. Now we're going to come out because we're safer. And the secret is for hunters, what do you use to get them out in daylight hours, shooting hours? And that's what EverCalm's really done, is it's allowed those mature bucks to feel safe in their environment while you're in their bedroom to come out in those daylight hours. And, we're just very blessed that it's worked for a lot of hunters.
See, and this is why this is so aptly named Whitetail Wisdom, because you have all these years of watching this, watching the herd that you have change on a daily basis, react on a daily basis, mature, trusting their senses in different ways throughout the course of the year. Because look, the springtime, they're running around, fa la la la, and it's true. They right. Literally, some of them are literally doing that. But then it's like, click,
Yep.
The hormones change, the physical being changes, their pecking order changes.
Yep.
And being in tune with that and trying to manipulate that in the most natural way is where a lot of these things are going to come into play. And this is why this is for me, a show that has taught me more, or actually a guest rather, that has taught me more over the 17 years than I gotta love my dad. I love him. But hunting at 14 deer for the first time, sit here, the deer are going to go by. Okay. Buddy, I sat there a lot of years. Yeah. No deer.
No deer went by.
And I did not get my first deer until I started this show, till I started my show. And it wasn't with a shot. I've never taken a deer with a shotgun or a rifle.
Oh, wow.
It was with a bow that I picked up for the first time at 40 years old. And my buddy Tom Nelson, the American archer, taught me over the phone, how to position my sight, how to, what things were going good. I said, Tom, I'm at 20 yards. I'm grouping about $50. Is that okay? I think he dropped the phone.
Yeah, I think you're good to go. I think you'll be just fine. Yeah, Tom's a good friend of both of ours.
Right, absolutely.
Known Tom with Anderson Archery way back when. But, I was fortunate and blessed. My dad was a big-time whitetail hunter and took me. I mean, I was literally going with him before I could actually hunt myself. Mm-hmm. And so I actually harvested my first buck opening day when I was 14 with a rifle. And it was kind of neat because he had already shot his right at daylight, called me over and says, here, take my gun, sit down at this stump. And an hour and a half later, I shot my buck, which was bigger than his. And I was, of course, already hooked, but that was, I mean, I swallowed the hook on that one right there. And hence now I'm a deer farmer. So.
Did I mention I forgot my gun my first opening day of firearm deer season?
Nope, but that one you may not want to mention.
The world knows now. Hey, look, man, if anybody's fallible, or it's going to be me, and I'm going to be the first one to throw myself under that bus.
Well, I will say that I had a TV host once forgot his bullets. Literally thought he had loaded his gun, and we had a buck that come out on it, and it went click. And we took 3 days trying to find this deer, and it went click, and he's kind of looking around dumbfounded, and his shells were all back in his bedroom. Oh no! And it was like goodbye. So it happens for anybody.
It does, and that's where again the learning process comes in, and that's what this show hopefully will be for people that tune in, watch, listen, however they get their podcast, whatever, medium this is going to be used in, that you have this life of living with deer, and we as a viewing, listening public have lots of questions.
Well, it's neat, and I've been blessed because when I watch the deer here on the farm, that's a very controlled setting.
Sure.
As we call them in pens. They're the pens of different sizes. And I says they're categories by age and sex. So it's a very controlled setting. Then I can watch them, and I've watched them for 27, 30 years in ranch settings. So in larger areas, so they're more natural, but it's still controlled. And then I get to watch them in the wild because we have deer outside this fence all the time.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so I get to watch 3 different, call it groups of deer, all the time within the seasons, the weather patterns, the environments, what similarities do they have, what differences do they have. And so you put all those together, and you can't help but learn some stuff. If you don't, you're pretty much been sleeping the entire time. And I haven't been sleeping. I really enjoy learning, but so anyway, we're going to wrap this session up. Again, if you have questions or if you want to have us talk about a certain topic, go to media@conquestscents.com. And we're going to come out with the next podcast, and we're actually going to have specific topics now that you kind of know who Duran and I are. We thank you for watching.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today on Whitetail Wisdom Podcast. If you have any questions or topics, you can email us at media@conquestscents.com. Remember to hit that subscribe button and follow Conquest Scents. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. If you're interested, we also have a live deer cam on the farm. You can watch it on our Conquest Scents YouTube channel. Don't forget, you can purchase our products at conquestscents.com.